The next session is today's keynote session. Calacanis is a celebrated entrepreneur in digital media. I met Jason 10 years ago when I joined one of his startups, Weblogs Inc., which was enormously successful and was one of the many examples of Jason's vision proving incisive and influential. Just a minute ago, Jason asked me to mention also to this audience that he got started in online radio in 1995, almost 20 years ago, with a show on the pseudo.com platform. These days, Jason is an angel investor. He is the host of the popular video podcast This Week in Startups, which has produced over 400 episodes. He's the CEO of Inside.com, and always, Jason is an irrepressible commentator on new media. It gives me great personal pleasure to introduce this session. Please join me and the whole RAIN team in welcoming one of the most astute thinkers and innovators in new media, my friend and this year's RAIN Summit West keynoter, Jason Calacanis.
Thanks for having me, Brad. All right. Thanks, everybody. I did this. When did I do this last? Like 10 years ago or 12 years ago? It was a long, long time ago. So I always ask myself when I come to these events, like, why should you care what the speaker has to say? And I think there's a couple of reasons. One, I started doing internet radio in 1995 when I was 23 or 24 years old with a guy named Josh Harris at pseudo.com. Does anybody remember pseudo.com was going to change the world and everything, right? They didn't, like startups are prone to do, but they did do a lot of interesting things and broke a lot of ground. I'm also have started a bunch of internet companies, sold a couple. The biggest success was a company called Weblogs Inc., which was during the blogging era, created brands like Engadget, Autoblog, Joystick, which got a couple name checks earlier. And in fact, at that company, we sold the first podcast sponsorship ever. So I had made friends with a guy named Dave Weiner, who many people in the technology industry know was one of the sort of godfathers of this. He's actually the guy who put the glue together between an RSS feed and an attachment. And so he's credited with being the godfather of all the podcasting stuff. And finally, I've angel invested in 60 or 70 companies in the last couple of years and hit a couple of what we call in our business, not home runs, but unicorns. And so I've been really privileged to be one of the first investors in companies like Uber, or an early investor in Swell, which I'm sure will be as successful. And a lot more work to do, as you know. So I've been around the space. I do this talk, The State of the Media, every year. I'm trying to do it maybe once or twice a year. And the reason I do it is because it keeps me particularly sharp, because I get all the data, and I have to update it. So I'm going to go very fast, and I'm going to talk about every single type of media, but a couple of themes will come across it. So just looking at media across all landscapes, the entire landscape, if you look at ad revenue, obviously TV is the biggest, but internet is really catching up to it and will, of course, catch up to it and maybe even surpass it in the next X number of years. That was a controversial statement, but radio, magazines, and newspapers still holding strong with decent revenue. On the sales revenue side, books, and that includes trade books, so it's a little bit of a funny number, and movies, gaming, and music still sell a lot of media. Now, new media is dwarfing old media in terms of market value. So this is market capitalization. This is not sales. This is the market capitalization. I'm going to put all these slides online as well. So if you look at the market capitalization of Apple, it's basically the same as all the old media companies. Or if you look at Apple, Google, Amazon, and Facebook, the four companies that matter in the world today, they are twice as big. And those companies really are the future. And the way they're spending money and investing is truly extraordinary. You've probably seen things like WhatsApp or Oculus or Nest getting bought by these companies. They have funny money. That's what that market capitalization means. That's monopoly money, and they're spending it buying the future. So all the change we've seen in the last 20 years is going to seem slow compared to the next 20. Now that seems crazy because living through the 70s, or some of us in here the 60s or 50s and the 80s and the 90s, it seemed like things were getting faster and faster and faster. I'm telling right now, the 20 years that we've just been through of the internet era is going to seem very slow when compared to the smartphone era and some of the other technologies coming out. In terms of projected growth by medium, if you look to the right, those are the businesses that are challenged, in some cases going down and some steady. I know you, I won't call you guys a challenge business. I think you're the business that's right on the bubble, actually. Newspapers, magazines, you do not want to be in that business. TV and internet, great business to be in. Radio, somewhere in between. Video games are huge, and there's a big change that's going on here, and that is that the console games, although they make a lot of money, are suddenly faced with mobile gaming, and the pie has gotten much bigger. And physical versus digital sales of games has changed radically in only 5 years. So if this was just 4 or 5 years ago, 8 out of 10 games would be bought in a store. Now it's 50-50. Nobody will ever go to a store to buy a video game again. That is going to end. Just like Blockbuster ended, the idea of a video game store will end. And everybody thought this would be this huge, amazing moment for the video game industry with the Xbox One coming out and PlayStation 4. Incredible devices, incredible hardware. Just phenomenal products. And they did have a nice big spike, but it came right back down to the pre-sales level. So there's a big kind of gasping going on in that business. Will these things actually grow, or are they just, starting their downward trend? So when I gave this talk in October 2013 at PubCon, one of the trends I looked at was AAA games are the new blockbuster films. So if you look at a film like Iron Man, which is the best film, highest grossing film of 2013, had a $200 million budget. Grand Theft Auto 5, the fifth version, $265 million budget. And it had total unit sales of 32 million, which is actually sounds like a small number, but they sell it for a lot of money each. So it did $2 billion, and Iron Man did $1.2 billion. So this is a pretty amazing trend that most people are not super aware of because it's a small number of people paying a lot of money. But this is where we're going to start to get into what's important, and that is the what I call the primary consumption device. This device changes everything. You all know that, but many people are underestimating exactly how big this revolution is. It's much bigger than the internet itself. Okay, so just as much as the internet has changed things, this will change it more, and we'll get into why. But here is something very interesting. If you look at the number of minutes that are spent, this isn't how much money is spent. This is just minutes. Gaming is the largest thing that is done on these devices. Now, people are in kind of denial about that, but it is what these devices are used for primarily. And one of the things that's interesting is everybody thought the mobile web, looking at your Chrome browser, your Safari browser would be the big activity on these phones. It turns out apps are the big activity. This is why Google is in a total complete panic and has spent so much money building Android, buying Motorola, because they see statistics like this, and they've been seeing them for years now, that people don't open browsers, they open apps. Well, we used to go to search for restaurants on Google, which is their money printing machine. Now we open up Yelp, right? This is a huge problem for them. Every single category is being apped, and that could spell doom for Google's money printing machine. The freemium model is dominating games, so you've probably seen this. You don't pay for games up front anymore. You start playing them, you get addicted, and then you pay just like quarters like we did in the 80s. So pretty loathsome, but we're back to the old model. Smartphones have a long way to go in terms of the total number of mobile phones out there. Smartphones are still a small percentage of the overall mobile phone market. So we're going to see a lot more mobile phones coming out. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Now, what if the iPad and the iPhone were consoles? There's about 500 million of these out there and growing. So many more, in fact, than all of the last couple of generations of consoles together. So when you say games, you're really talking about phones. And in October, when I did this talk last, I was referring to two of these amazing game companies, and they're all coming out of the Nordic area. So Finland, Sweden, you have King, you have Supercell, Spotify. It's amazing what's going on there. And I had asked somebody, why do you think all this great stuff from mobile is coming out of there? And their idea was that the people in the Nordic countries were very good at rigidly understanding the device and design, and they were very design conscious, architecture-wise. So that architecture design bent that is taught in school there, and that they have really great aesthetics, is translating well into mobile phones. I don't know if that's true or not. But these games have gone from a couple of hundred in yearly revenue to just even more, and we'll get to that in a second. So I predicted there'd be a $1 billion AAA casual game. So casual games like Angry Birds or Supercell. And we were pretty far off from that. But now when the numbers came out with the IPO of King, we actually see that these companies are actually multi-billion dollar games. So it's well above $1 billion on casual games. So if you want to get super depressed, just think about that. Like, they build one game and it makes $1 billion. It's pretty amazing. And the games are getting even more casual. And this is because people want their games to go international. So the two biggest games in recent history have been Flappy Birds, which was taken out of the App Store and then put back in by the creator, which subsequently created hundreds of knockoffs, which is what you're seeing there on the top right. And this other game, Threes and 2048, which are like sort of number games, have done absolutely tremendous. And they're getting simpler and simpler, but more and more elegant. So has anybody here played Threes or 2048? Raise your hand high. Great. And has anybody played Flappy Bird? Raise your hand. Okay, interesting. So, and this is like, I don't know, the average age here is probably 40 or something in this room. So like, you're not kids, you're playing games, right? Like, they reintroduced gaming into this older segment that really wasn't there. Another thing that's occurring is in Korea, there's a company called Kakao and another one called Line. They're sort of like WhatsApp. And they have taken these communication platforms and incorporated games into them, and they now get 60% of their money from games. So don't be surprised if we see Twitter or WhatsApp or some of these other communication platforms add gaming, since they already have identity built into them. Now let's look at television. This is sort of, to me, when I see a chart like this, you know, I get a little bit scared because the first number is the same and the second number is not changing that much. 65, 66, 69 billion. I mean, it's big numbers. They're making money, but it should be more. And here is the YouTube comparison. People generally think YouTube's making about $6 billion and $1 billion in revenue. And so you can't dismiss it anymore when it's 10% of the revenue of overall television. It's a pretty fierce competitor, in fact, and anybody who has a teenager or a younger person knows that they are spending a lot of time watching YouTube videos and subscribing to things. So it's, you know, 2 or 3 AMCs and bigger than ESPN, but not as big as NBC. But competition is coming. People in the technology business have generally been afraid to compete with YouTube, but the dollars have become so huge. The hosting costs and transmission costs for video have gone down so tremendously. Yahoo is rumored to be building their competitor. Amazon has been making noise. And it's pretty clear that Twitter is got a product in the works. And I gave this prediction in October that Twitter would take on YouTube directly. People thought this was crazy. Twitter is like a messaging platform. Why would they take on YouTube? They got enough problems. But it turns out they've quietly amassed 60 video partners, from advertisers to sports leagues. I think they have the NBA and NHL putting up clips there now. And so this prediction became very real recently because Baljit, who was the #1 product person at YouTube, who was the #2 person behind Solar, who was running it. Solar left. Baljit was supposed to get the job. Susan Wojcicki, who runs the ad network for Google, got the job instead. So she built their first money printing machine. She took the job at YouTube. That should tell you something. And he was kind of the spurned lover in all this. He jumped ship to Twitter. That means Twitter will have a direct competitor to YouTube within the year, I believe. Now, what does all that mean? It means that pay TV and the concept of buying cable or satellite is going to go away, or it's going to be seriously crippled. So how many people here have gotten rid of cable, DirecTV, gotten rid of their pay TV service in the last year? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it was like 6 or 7 people, actually. And adults is not where they're losing people. They're kind of losing people in the middle. It's definitely not worth it. And so if you look here on a quarterly basis, people are unsubscribing in the hundreds of thousands. The only person who's shown any growth are the telcos, because they have a new product that's more price competitive. And so here's where you can start to see it. Netflix, which granted is only $7 a month, Comcast $70 a month. So it's a 10x difference there. So you got to take that this information with that in mind. But Netflix is now bigger than Comcast in terms of the subscriber base, and people who have Netflix would certainly, if they had HBO, I believe that number would crush. And here it is. Netflix is now bigger than HBO, something we never thought we'd see happen. And you have to look at that and say, well, if HBO is so just unbelievably brilliant, and they have these shows that everybody watches. Why are they not growing? The reason they're not growing is because they're so tied to that Comcast, those deals, they can't unbundle. But at a certain point, pissing off those distributors and going direct will make HBO just an incredibly huge business. It could double, triple. It might go 5x in size. We don't know what the global demand for an HBO a la carte would be. So that HBO is just this phenomenal business case that they'll be studying years from now. And internet TV is trending to free. So it used to be, how many people have an Apple TV? Raise your hand nice and high if you have an Apple TV. Holy shit, you all have Apple TV. Who doesn't have Apple TV? About yourselves. Okay. No, but you probably have something else, like Roku or something. Roku, okay, fine. So anyway, these things are going to zero. And right now, anybody get the Chromecast, by the way? Chromecast, a couple people? Wow. This is like, for a radio conference, you guys are on the cutting edge. It's pretty impressive, actually. I definitely underestimated you. When I said how many people have Chromecast, I was expecting like 3 people to raise their hands. It was like 1/3 of the audience. The Chromecast is an amazing device, as anybody who has it understands. It's basically a free Apple TV because you get 2 months of Netflix with it, even if you're a current subscriber. And there is a trend that's going to occur. This is the beginnings of the trend, but YouTube, work, full-scale television, and the stuff in between is all going to start to blend. Now, you got Game of Thrones and Walking Dead on one side, $3 to $6 million. Those are the top shows on television. But then at the end, you have like Portlandia and Video Game High School, and Louis C.K.'s show would be in here. Alpha House was an Amazon-produced program. Video Game High School was a Kickstarter-funded, which is on YouTube. They also had distribution on Microsoft's platform. So the budgets are going to be coming down on TV. And then the budgets for YouTube shows, Yahoo shows. Yahoo's going to launch 6 original shows. Amazon original shows. They're going to start to come up, and we're going to meet somewhere in the middle. And really, if you think about this, nobody really gives a shit what network you're on, right? Like many people, how many people here have watched a show, binge-watched a show, and not known what network it was on? Right, exactly. Nobody cares, with the exception of maybe HBO, perhaps AMC, nobody really cares about the network brand anymore. Maybe Disney, Marvel, like there's a couple of things where they have passionate audiences that actually care about the brand name of that. But like CBS, NBC, ABC, none of that matters to anybody anymore. They just want the quality shows. And really the trend is that winners and losers are defined super fast. So this TV show, Bates Motel, got a bunch of different good reviews. And it started trending. So let me just ask this question about True Detective. How many people have seen an episode of True Detective? Raise your hand. Okay, wow, half the audience. How many people saw that episode in the first episode when it was first on that first day? Like 4 of you, exactly. Many people are coming to these shows 4 or 5 episodes in, and because of this binge watching and the ability to get anything anytime, it's really changing how these networks are going to have to operate, and the opportunity is becoming greater. Live events, however, still matter. You have the Super Bowl doing as good as ever, and then if you try to murder somebody on television live, you'll also get a lot of viewers. So the Red Bull Space Jump had 8 million people watching it, and the Grand Canyon Tightrope Walk had 13 million people watching it. Interestingly, I'm sort of being a little cavalier about the murder thing, but Red Bull, I spoke to an executive there at a YouTube conference, and I said, I would be very concerned about having a person jump like that. Like, what happens if they die? What does that do to Red Bull's brand? He's like, yeah, we talked about that. There was one situation we thought was a pretty good likelihood, and it actually happened. I'm like, well, I saw it. He didn't die. He goes, yeah, he spiraled out of control for that first 30 seconds. We cut the feed because that was our biggest fear, was that he spiraled. So when we were in the room in the headquarters, like everybody thought he's going to die or possibly pass out, and this is going to be a clusterfuck. They still did it anyway, which is just amazing to me. I mean, it's sort of like the Running Man. I don't know what. And then actually, sadly, we have the X Games also. I'm sorry to go off on a little bit of tangent. They had somebody die doing flips on a snowmobile, which is like, who's flipping a snowmobile over? This thing, ridiculously dangerous thing to do. I mean, and I'm not like some, like, hey, you can't play. Anyway, moving on. Old is dating new. We're starting to see a lot of the networks that were building content for YouTube get bought. Now, this would normally be a sign of strength. However, this is an incredible sign of weakness. DreamWorks bought Awesome TV for like $33 million. In our industry, that's like a kind of a sad exit if $10 million has been pumped into it, because when you put $10 million in as a venture capitalist, you generally have a $20 or $30 million valuation. So they basically probably just got their money back. Big Frame was sold to them for $14 million. Again, that would be called like a push in our industry. And Disney bought Maker Studios for $500 million. Now, that seems like a huge win, except the company had like $100 million pumped into it. It was losing $2 or $3 million. And none of these companies can seem to make YouTube work. Why? YouTube has so much traffic, and they spread the ads across all of them, and they take 45% of the revenue. So what happened was and I was one of the funded channels in YouTube's experiment, and I still have a bunch of content on there, 40,000 videos from one of my companies, and 20, 30 million views a month. But you make $1 CPM, $2 CPM, because they spread it across it. And if they take 45%, you could never really invest in a sales team. So it's sort of tragic for the individual channels on there. No individual channels except literally the top 10 can make a living. All the other ones are barely making a salary. But you can become famous on it. So YouTube, great place to build a brand, horrible place to build a business. So I made a prediction that Apple would launch a TV and that they would buy Netflix. It's a kind of a crazy prediction on both fronts, but I keep making this prediction about Apple releasing a TV. I made this one in 2008 of October, and I think the statute of limitations has passed. I was told by somebody in or around Apple that they were working on it. Apple tends to work on things 10 years out, 7 years out, and they kind of wait on it. So they're definitely working on a TV, but being the perfectionists they are, they like to take their time in putting things out. And you may have read that Apple and Comcast are talking. This is the worst possible thing Comcast could do. It's just absolute death for Comcast, which means they're probably going to do it. But giving Apple, a company as deft as Apple and as loved as Apple, the interface to your product when you're as hated and loathed as a cable company, like that is a really stupid move. I mean, it's just really bad. But they're probably going to do it. So here's why Apple will definitely have a TV out this year, I believe. They launched the Mac Pro. It supports like a half dozen 4K monitors, but they didn't release a 4K monitor. So if you buy an Apple Mac Pro, this is the new tower, you have to buy an Asus monitor, which is like one of 2 monitors that are available. That doesn't make any sense, right? So but they also sold 13 million of these Apple TVs, and you keep hearing they're adding services to it, and as the people know, it's got what do we have, like 2 or 3 updates in the last 6 months on that device, and we didn't have any for 2 years. That should give you some signaling something's coming. Winter is coming in the form of the 4K monitor tonight, right? Everybody's excited. So there'll be a 4K monitor from them, and my prediction is it will have the Apple TV built in, because that $100 device probably cost Apple $20 to make. So putting it inside the monitor makes no difference. So you won't be able to buy an Apple 4K monitor without it having Apple TV built in. Just like you can't buy a Samsung monitor without a Samsung TV without the Smart Hub. And boy, is that going to change everything. And if you've read the excellent biography of Steve Jobs, he said he finally figured it out. It's pretty clear what he figured out was unbundling, buying shows, or buying channels was the big win. How he, or Apple now, makes that possible, nobody seems to know. But as we all know, historically, Steve Jobs was able to really bully or charm, or both, music companies, magazine companies, Rupert Murdochs of the world, the big record labels of the world, into sort of his reality distortion field and get them to do something. It seems like they're having a hard time with the TV business getting those Comcasts of the world and DirecTVs to actually give up their business. So don't be surprised if they go buy one of them too. So let's talk about movies real quick. For some reason, people are buying Blu-rays or DVDs. Who are these people that are still buying physical? I mean, I guess maybe if you have kids and you have a minivan and you want to have I don't know, anybody here buy a Blu-ray in the last year? Really? Why? Oh, you have kids. Okay. Anybody? Was it kids? Oh, so did anybody buy a Blu-ray not for their kids this year? You did. Why? Okay, for mom. Okay, that makes total sense. Okay, now I get it. You're buying it for your mom or your kids. Oh, the commentary, yeah, like the Blu-ray Criterion, yeah. You're 0.1% of the audience. But me too, by the way. I actually bought the Blade Runner 25th anniversary, like 7-disc set. Like an idiot, but I love it. So anyway, global box office. Look at this. Hey, movies are flat in the US and Canada, but they're growing internationally, which is why you see so many movies that are comics, comic book based, action based, or animated, because those things you can translate them really well. The Academy Award winners, if you look at 3 of the 4 of them, like American Hustle or people dying of AIDS and having to buy drugs illegally, Dallas Buyers Club, Her, something that's got a lot of cultural references in it. These things don't fly internationally unless you do something like take the 12 Years a Slave poster and you put Brad Pitt as the star, which actually happened. I'm not kidding. There was a big controversy about this because they couldn't sell the movie in other countries, but they're like, we can sell Brad Pitt, so let's do that. And if you look, it did really well. So, and Iron Man 3, actually, I don't know if people know this, they did a bunch of scenes of Iron Man being, worked on medically with Chinese actors in it. So, and they did a whole tour around that. So we're actually making this content for a global audience. It kind of makes movies suck a little bit, and you would think it would get rid of like all the art house films, but the art house films are finding other ways to survive. So that's a really good sign. But as far as Hollywood's concerned, if it's not Transformers or Avengers, it doesn't really deserve to exist. And one of the, it was actually funny, I was at a poker game, and it's in Hollywood, and I'm talking to a guy, and he's like, I work at Paramount. And I was like, what do you do? And he said, work at Paramount or whatever market. I said, oh, really? What, you make any interesting films? Like, you don't make like schlocky stuff like Transformers or anything. And I just like see this look on his face, and he's like, I actually made the last 3 Transformers films. They made $1.5 billion. Sorry. Oops. So 3D is the real reason that there's been any growth at movies. So the actual number of people going to movies is still going down, but because they added 3D, which adds absolutely nothing to films except for maybe gravity, it kind of ruins the experience, in my opinion. It's kind of a scam. We all should stop going to 3D movies, so they stop doing that. So based on the success of 3D, they're doing 4D now, so they'll have this in Los Angeles soon. Vibrating seats, wind, fog, rain, kind of like the Terminator thing we all went to at Disney a couple of years back. They're doing adult-only screenings, not of adult content, but alcohol and no kids. So in order to make it more delightful for adults, if you live in LA, I don't know if they have this in your town, but we have adult-only screenings, so you have to be 21 and above because they serve alcohol in it. That's their little way to sort of get over it, I guess, and not have kids in the theater. Pay TV and streaming is going to surpass the box office in revenue, so that's kind of awesome for the movie companies, I think. People will watch a lot more because they'll be at home. And, it's very hard when paradigms shift, but it generally works out okay. It's just painful in the process. So as you can see, the rental stores and the DVD sales and subscription rentals are all down, but digital purchasing and subscription service and video on demand are all up. We're actually seeing some tremendous activity in VOD and simultaneous release. This movie Arbitrage, which actually a friend of mine, Nick Jarecki, made, did $14 million on VOD. It crushed all records. And before that, Margin Call, interestingly enough, both are films about like hedge funds and Wall Street. That one did $8 million, and this Drinking Buddies one did well as well. So VOD is doing huge, and everybody wants to get in on VOD. I didn't even realize it, but DirecTV had VOD and Ethernet, and you could download all the channels. If you want to go to like channel 501 for HBO, if you type 1501, you go to the downloadable stuff. And like, I don't know, that came out like a year ago. They really didn't make a big deal out of it. Crowdfunding is a huge trend. In October of 2013, I talked about this. At the time, Veronica Mars had only raised $1 million. She did 5.7. And then you have some other famous folks, like the guy who did Garden State, and Spike Lee was actually giving people the ability to go to a Knicks game with him, which was kind of cool. Veronica Mars only did $2 million and has done $3 million already, so it's kind of, she actually raised more than the movie made, which exactly proves the point, which is like, if this thing doesn't have a market for it, the rabid fans will actually pay to make something that is more expensive than the total market for it. Now, this seems like a bad sign, but it's actually, in a way, a good sign. It's like there's a small group of people who will overpay to get something, right? You'd be like, oh, Game of Thrones is ending, but there's 6,000 people willing to pay $1,000 each to do one more episode, or 60,000 people willing to pay $100 each. I mean, I think that let me ask this question. For whatever your favorite TV show is, would you pay $500 to see one more season of it? Sopranos, whatever. How many people would pay $500 to see one more season of Sopranos? How about 100? Yeah, so good. So, how many people would pay $100 to see one more season of whatever their favorite show is? Breaking Bad. Okay, there you go. Good. I did it wrong. You're right. How many people would pay $300 to see one more season of Breaking Bad? 400? Sold, okay. Bryan Cranston, take note. So this is my prediction from October. I still stand by it. Quentin Tarantino, Chris Nolan, J.J. Abrams, somebody on that level will do a $50 million Kickstarter. Of course, when I brought this up with a bunch of people I know in the movie business, oh my God, that's stupid. Those people are so bankable, whatever. I said, yeah, but they don't own their content. They don't own 100% of it. So when J.J. Abrams gets tired of remaking Star Trek and Star Wars and wants to make his own franchise, why wouldn't he go on to Kickstarter, raise the $50 million to get it going? He's got $50 million probably, and then he could own it and never give away an ounce of ownership of it. This is what the next piece of the puzzle is 20, 30, 40, $50 million Kickstarters. Let's get to radio here. So this chart is going up. That's good. Congratulations. Radio, for some reason, has resisted this downward trend that magazines and newspapers are in. This chart was interesting that we found. It seems that millennials and Generation X and baby boomers don't actually listen all that differently, which is kind of cool and good because they all have smartphones, right? It's a cross-generational thing. Everybody upgrades their cars pretty much the same. The reach of online radio is just extraordinary in the United States. It's 183 million. It will be 183 million people. It's 147 million people. There's 300 million Americans. I mean, wow. Great job, everybody. And then if you look in a car, this is where there'll be a lot of room for growth. Most people in the car are using their radios, not their smartphones or the internet. That will change 100%. Like the idea of like terrestrial radio and FM and AM, I think that's sort of going to go away. And maybe you'd fall back on that if, for some reason you couldn't get your IP or you're in the mountains or something. But it's going to be the future is you're going to just come into your car and you'll have everything logged in on the dashboard or on your car. Everybody knows that. Everybody seems to be, this is an interesting chart because it seems like the tablets are very popular amongst 35 to 44-year-olds, and we were debating why that was, 25 to 44-year-olds, and we figured it out, kids. Kids love tablets, but tablets are much too expensive. Tablets are too damn expensive. They have to come down to $199 or $99 to become mass devices. That's why smartphones are doing so well. Pandora is still doing exceptionally well. This is one of the lead examples of a company in this space. And their growth is slowing, but their revenues are still impressive. And when you look at what's happening on iTunes, my gosh, it's like an public radio world. And this is the top 10 from October, and here it is in April. And those are some of the ones that are actually moving up, which I think gives you a pretty good trend of people want very packaged, personality-driven or topic-driven content. They don't want to just turn on the radio and then figure out what they want. They want something very specific and high quality. This also is probably a little bit skewed because, talk radio, it's done very well by these people. So I wonder why these people are still, the people who own the shows, who license them to NPR, are still doing it. They should all be leaving and making them into for-profit. So that's going to probably be a trend too. iTunes is working exceptionally hard. You saw they probably did a deal with NPR, and public radio is doing their own apps. So everybody's getting their own apps and trying to lock down content in this space. But it was 10 years ago that Steve Jobs announced podcast support. I'll show a video clip of that in a bit. And it really was like not a consumer experience. It was very hard. Grab the RSS feed, add it, to this like sub-menu somewhere. Now with Swell Radio, which I'm an investor in, and a bunch of other companies, it's getting super easy. TuneIn, Stitcher, super easy to get to this content. So a big trend is direct-to-consumer radio growing. You have comedians here, and you have Leo, who's come up a bunch of time. I used to be a regular on the show back in the day. And they're getting real revenue, and they have real heavyweights actually doing these shows. And they do it, I think, because they really enjoy it, and they like the artistic freedom of it. And none of these, to the best of my knowledge, are really terrestrial radio or satellite radio people. I'll show this clip in a minute of me talking to Steve Jobs. Another trend is we're starting to see like these crazy left field podcasts now. Podcasting is getting so easy and so mainstream that it's getting past sort of the early adopters who really were either drawn to it, like technologists or comedians who are like, oh, I'm good on radio because I do radio shows in the morning to get people to buy tickets for my show that night. So they're kind of used to doing Howard Stern or Opie and Anthony or whatever. They're on that circuit. Now you get a Facebook, this artist, David Cho, who was the one who did all the Facebook art in their office, famously, and a porn star doing this very popular podcast. The venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz by Mark Andreessen hired somebody. They do a weekly podcast. And there's a guy telling 3-hour stories about Genghis Khan in his room, which is crazy. So I think older players are going to have to find ways to stay relevant. Obviously, people are doing all kinds of award shows and trying to do bigger things. I think really the focus needs to be on these new up-and-coming personalities. So my prediction is podcasters will become coveted by like a Clear Channel or these folks. This is the sort of farm league, and how do you get these folks to come back onto terrestrial radio when they don't want to have a specific length to their show? I've done 450 episodes of my show. Sometimes it's 50 minutes, sometimes it's 3 hours, right? That's like a podcaster thing. Like the show's as long as I say it is. When I hit stop, that's when it stops. And Leo does the same thing. And I want to read my ads, so we do something on my show called whitelisted advertising. When I started the show, we didn't have ads. Then we had people start calling us to do ads. I just said, here's a list of 25 products I use every day. I gave them to my part-time salesperson. I said, I will read an ad for any of these 25. I will not do ads for anybody else. And he says, well, I got this person on the phone. This person has a backup product. I'll say, I know that backup product. It absolutely sucks. They throttle your speed. I don't want it. Because I can't give a live ad for that because I'm an angel investor on these companies. I can't have my reputation be that I'm doing schlocky shit. So find me somebody whose product I use. I use on the list, GoToMeeting, MailChimp, just crazy stuff that I use. And they're like, yeah, we'll give you $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 an episode to read the ad. And then I read the ads and I tell stories about me using the product. And we're sold out for 6 months at a time. And my little humble podcast does $500,000 a year, and it's got 5 people working on it, 100,000 downloads. It works, especially if you're willing to read the ad, which is what Leo does as well. And he won't sell out and have anybody. They call me for e-cigarettes. Jason, will you read an ad for an e-cigarette? What the fuck does an e-cigarette have to do with This Week in Startups and technology? They're like, I know, but you read such great ads. I'm like, that's the point. I wouldn't read an ad for an e-cigarette. So my prediction in 2013 was that new platforms will start to dominate, because I saw this, because it was starting to dominate my life. Then I met the founder of Swell, and after I made this prediction, I invested $250,000 in the company. I think it's going to do tremendous. It's sort of like the Pandora of, it's like Pandora for talk radio. If you haven't, how many people have tried Swell? Just tried Swell. Almost everybody. Yeah, the other half. Try it. You'll really like it. It's awesome. So another prediction I made back then was that show-based consumption would outpace time-based consumption, and that's really started to happen. I don't know what that does for KCRW, which I used to listen to on my dial, and now I'm just like, well, I'm just going to get those shows and podcast them and listen to them on Swell and or on Stitcher or whatever it is. You saw this. This American Life is leaving the distributor, and he wants to self-distribute possibly. This is going to be a huge trend. I mean, if I was working in Clear Channel, one of those places, I would be like, give me $100 million, and then I would go to the top NPR talent, and I'd be like, NPR's paying you $250,000? How would you like to make $1 million a year? And they'd be like, well, I'm a liberal, I like being on NPR, and okay, how about 1.5? Great, let's go. Boom. Money talks, right? What the fuck is NPR paying these people that you radio executives are not just going in there and it's fish, it's a barrel, go. Just go grab all of the fish, But what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to figure out how to manage this new type of talent who's not really in it for the money. They're really in it for the glory and for the audience. It's kind of not bullshit. Like Mark Maron and his podcast, or Adam Curry, or Adam Carolla, or myself, or Leo. You do it because you want to do it. And the people who succeed at it, because I've watched a lot of people succeed and fail at it, the people who succeed at it are people who have massive domain expertise in their vertical. They're loved by the people in their vertical. They have some endemic audience. So they have this deep knowledge. They're 20 years into their career, 30 years into their career. They have some weight behind them. And they tend to be super affluent and not doing it for the money. So they're doing it because they love it, and they have to give up 3 or 4 years of their life to build an audience, which is what it takes. It takes 2, 3, 4 years of doing this to actually build up a decent-sized audience, and you probably have to lose $1,000 or $2,000 a week to do it right by having engineers and producers. So you have to go to those people and say, hey, you've got a show. We don't need to own your tapes. We don't need to own your archive. We just want to have your show on our network and help you reach more people because you rock. We'll sell the ads. We'll give you half. And something that radio people I don't think are probably used to doing maybe or not. And certainly those people are not going out and saying, I want to do these specific commercial breaks, and they're just not part of the infrastructure of radio. So some clever person will figure out how to get them to come to terrestrial radio or satellite radio especially without compromising their show. And that person will be very successful. The music industry, Ted Cohen could do this better than me, but obviously they've still got a lot of physical sales going on and licensing, and the revenue's flat. We all know that. Wah. But you know, on-demand and internet radio are the future. Obviously, Spotify is doing tremendous in terms of growth. This is, you know, going to be a curve that may not be dissimilar to Netflix. I mean, that's kind of the big question: is can this be tens of millions of people? It's 5 million people now. I think the answer is absolutely yes. But really, for me, YouTube is the real Spotify. I see a lot of young people who will pull up a playlist, and they make playlists on YouTube of all their favorite artists on Vivo, et cetera. Then they play it on mobile. Then they get blocked from playing it on mobile, so then they rip it down with video cache or any Chrome extension, rips it to an MP3 file. Like, it's really, when you talk about music, it's so available in so many places for free that the idea of paying for it is kind of hard. But I guess YouTube is just paying some. Is Ted in the room? Is it? The whisper is that they're going to pay $1 billion or something to just like the music industry to allow this to sort of occur. Another interesting trend is that songs are jumping to the top of the charts based upon viral videos because Billboard is counting these views. So when this woman quit and she used the Kanye West song, it shot to the top of the charts. It was pretty funny. Everybody obviously is trying to get into streaming music, which is, it really tells you something about the technology industry because tech people are so burned on the music industry. I tell everybody, like, I will never invest in a movie, a restaurant, the music industry, or healthcare because obviously movies and the restaurants, that's just, you're going to lose a lot of money and there's no chance of making a lot. But then the other ones, it's anybody who's been in the technology industry for 20 years knows the second you do anything interesting in music, the music industry comes and kills your business. And you know, you have to negotiate with them constantly, and there's so many of them to negotiate with that it's too much friction. So the VCs and the tech industry have generally said, like, fuck it, we're staying out of music. Good luck to anybody else who wants to bang their head against the wall. But the fact that they're starting to come back means either they're masochists or have a short memory or that something's changed. They probably have a short memory. No, I think it's changing. I think the music industry is a little bit more open. Obviously, the major trend is, you know, people are going to be putting these things in the dashboard. This is the real trend happened for me. So I'm a huge Howard Stern fan for many years. My friend asked me at dinner last night, 2 nights ago on Friday, you know, if Jason could do anything he wanted to do, like, what would he really want to do? And I was like, why are you talking to me like a therapist? And he said, well, no, I'm just curious. Like, what's your, like, peak of your week? I was like, actually, the best 2 hours of the week for me is when I'm doing my show and having an interesting conversation, and people tell me they listen to the show, This Week in Startups, and they give me feedback. It's like, why don't you do that full time? I was like, I never really thought about that, but in another life, I would have liked to have been like Howard Stern or something and just talk for 2 hours a day. And I think that's when, you know, like, the only reason I'm holding on to Sirius right now is for Howard. Like, the second he's done, I'm done. Because I used to get NBA through them. Now I have NBA, an NBA app that syncs. And so I do it that way because I can listen to Clyde Frazier in New York, not like whoever the national one is. So people are pretty discerning. I can get, on Swell, I get all the NPR and all that stuff, like, very well organized. On Stitcher, I get stuff well. And then I have the Tesla, and it's got Stitcher and TuneIn Radio built into the dashboard. So I'm never at a loss. So I find myself less and less using Sirius. I mean, why am I paying for it? I had 5 Sirius subscriptions 3 years ago. I have 1 now. 5 to 1. So that's going to be a big trend. Spotify made a trend that they would go from a streaming service to a record label, and they would start doing merchandising support. A couple of months later, they added merchandising support. So I got lucky on that prediction. The publishing business, ebooks, and publishing is contracting a little bit. Ebooks are growing. It's becoming largely an indie trend. I'm going to go a little bit faster now. The real key to this is these people who are authors in print are getting like 12% royalties, but if they self-publish, they get 70%. If they self-publish with a publisher, they get like 60%. And ebooks are better when they're smaller. So all these friends of mine who are authors are writing 10,000, 20,000 word books, making 70%. They're selling half as much, but they're winding up netting 3 times as much, 4 times as much, and they own it. And they don't have to go through and so book agents and everybody are just having a heck of a time with this. And you can see the 50 Shades effect. This came from indie publishing, 50 Shades of Grey, biggest, you know, movie fight in the last couple of years. And it turns out the best price point is under $4. Crowdfunding is going to be huge for this. Anybody here have Wattpad? Who knows what Wattpad is or has Wattpad? Wow, I got you guys. A full zero. Perfect. You have your homework. Download Wattpad. It's brilliant. There are 40 million people using this app. Again, primary consumption device, changes everything. It is free publishing and free reading, no paid component to it yet, and it's crushing it. And it's sort of like Kindle, but for free and for amateurs. A bunch of these authors are losing their book deals. They go print it on Kindle, and they get re-signed. Or they can't get signed in the US, so then they do their digital. Their digital does so well that then they get signed for their print, and they're doing all kinds of hybrid. These kind of hybrid deals is what I would recommend for the radio business. I know it's usually very cookie cutter. This is the only way we do deals with content with people. Like, you have to really be flexible in this new world. Okay, you want to keep this? We'll keep that. You want this? Chinese menu it. A little bit of everything. There's a bunch of new ebook subscription services for mobile where you pay one fee and you get all the books you can eat. They're all going to fail. Tell like it is. So my prediction is J.K. Rowling, the next one, will emerge on Wattpad and fund their movie on Indiegogo. So this is a trend you're seeing across mediums, whether it's games, indie games, not coming from the big studios, or movies, or television shows, podcasts. It's going to happen across the ecosystem. Self-funding, crowdfunding is going to be the bottom rung of this. Magazines are a complete, utter disaster. You just be thankful you're not in this business because all the charts go down and to the right. Anybody here, looking at this chart, how many people here have canceled a subscription to one of these 5 or 6? How many people have canceled subscriptions to some of these? If you can't see it, The Atlantic, Newsweek, New Yorker, Economist, The Week, and Time. Right, exactly. So we're all canceling these things. And the magazine pages are going down. The subscription rates are just brutal. They keep going down. And their web traffic seems not bad, a couple million people, until you put them against Upworthy and BuzzFeed and you realize how de minimis it truly is. And the reason for this is the medium of magazines just does not translate well to digital. It's a medium that people don't really need anymore, and it's sort of going to be retired. Radio is the opposite. Radio is something that people always like, will always love. It goes in your ears. It actually works better because of this device. So there's huge opportunities. And so what they're doing is they're just all reducing their frequency. They're cutting how many they're going to do. But some people are printing, interestingly enough, the first 3 here are websites. Check. For marketing reasons, the first 3 on the left are all websites that are doing magazines for marketing purposes. Social magazines are getting very popular. People are building their own. I don't think this is going to be huge, but it's cute. Lightweight subscription, you're going to see a lot of these lightweight subscription magazines, 100,000 circ, 50,000 circ, and they'll become sustainable. So like podcasts. Newspapers, just crushed on every front. Across the board, readership going down. And the only 3 that really matter anymore are the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, US Today, LA Times kind of hanging on. And the ad spending of all printed newspapers is being eclipsed by online. And people didn't think that. Crowdfunding will work for local news. That will start to happen, or just hiring somebody to do tweets. And a lot of people are trying to do journalism in a Kickstarter way. Nobody's made it work, except for like a magazine in Finland and some things in Korea. There's a couple of little items outside the US that have worked. But this will work. It's a prediction. You will pay to see more journalism in the world. How many people here think they would pay, if online didn't exist, how many people here would pay for a subscription to it or crowdfund what they thought was an important journalistic report? Right. And I don't think you're lying, because you're the same people who, give to public radio. Patch was an utter disaster for AOL. It was a good idea, but not a great idea, not a bad idea. It was straight a good idea, but it was executed poorly, so good times poor equals disaster. And so it went out of business. Not too many lessons there, other than if you have a good idea, you have to execute excellent to get a good result. You can't execute a good idea poorly and get anything but a terrible result. The internet revenue is growing steadily, tremendously. And this is where you really start to see where the difference is. We're going to have a huge growth spurt between 2012 and 2017. And TV, a modest one. Newspapers and magazines continue to go down. Radio goes up a little bit. Unfortunately, a lot of our revenue is based on display banner ads. That's going to go away. That's the green part of the chart. And we'll see a lot more video. That's the huge trend. A lot of these new sites are getting crazy, crazy traffic. BuzzFeed is like this crazy savant that's able to just get massive traffic. Nobody really knows exactly how they're doing it. A lot of it's Facebook related. And social sharing is the big trend. So we used to build businesses based on Google sending traffic. Now you send them based on Twitter and Facebook doing traffic. So that's BuzzFeed and eHow. One business got crushed. One business is soaring. And in fact, BuzzFeed now gets more from Facebook than Google. Upworthy, everybody knows this whole Facebook sharing, like here's a kitten being resuscitated by a fireman. Go ahead, don't click like. Be an evil person who doesn't like kittens, firemen, or people coming back to life. Go ahead, we dare you. Don't. But you feel it feels kind of like really manipulative, like, you know. I was just gonna make a joke, but anyway. Native ads are driving a lot of the new revenue. What is a native ad, you ask? A native ad is an ad that a consumer cannot tell is an ad. And the FTC is going to come down like a ton of bricks on these, I predict. So when you look at that ad on the left, it's kind of highlighted in yellow on the bottom right. You can't see it too clearly. It says like that's an ad. Maybe 2/3 of people know it's an ad. But then if you landed on this individual page, you would have no idea because that little circle there in red is the only thing that tells you it's a sponsored post. So look for the FTC to come down on all these, you know, over-aggressive ads. A lot of new faces in the newsroom right now. Jeff Bezos, Pierre Omidyar, really rich guys, really intelligent. They see the broken problem, all those stats on news. They see an opportunity. Which, check. That's what you should see as well with radio. When it's flat like that or going down, it means there could be a huge opportunity. That's what these gentlemen are seeing inside of news. Oh, it needs to exist in the world, so let me spend, you know, $250 million to see if I can make it work. And we have all these all-star journalists, again, sort of like the podcasting trend or the movie trend, who are either crowdfunding their way to success or able to just leave their existing publications and start new publications. So it's a golden age of journalism, in fact. Even though the newspapers are dying, it is absolutely a golden age in journalism. When these journalists can leave and raise tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to start a new publication, that has not happened for a century. And back when it happened, it wasn't rich people giving money to like a bunch of great journalists. It was rich people saying, if I start a publication, I can really manipulate the fuck out of society. Let me start my own publication and hire a bunch of journalists to get my agenda through Congress or whatever. This is a little bit more interesting. Another trend is database journalism. Infographics, et cetera. Nate Silver doing 538, left the New York Times. David from The Upshot is the new publication at the New York Times replacing Nate Silver's. Ezra Klein joining Vox Media from the Washington Post. They're all doing data-driven journalism, infographics, explaining concepts. This is something you guys in the radio business should really, really look at because the TED listening hour on NPR is doing phenomenal. Freakonomics is doing phenomenal. Really, I think radio underestimates the audience and got so big and so efficient and so good at sales. It always seems to me from the outside that radio is very sales-driven, and you have like who was the guy in charge? Who's the guy? Mel Karmazin and these kind of guys. Like it seems like very like let's beat last month's number. Let's beat last month's number. More sales, more sales. I think you got to slow down on that front and just say what is like the epic content we can produce that gives massive joy and knowledge and makes people's lives better because that's what people are doing. Oh, thank you for that. I don't know what's going to resonate with you guys, honestly. Like, it's fantastic for me to be here and not know anything about radio and maybe get something right. But I do think that that's the huge opportunity is like really crafting great data, great content, and spending a lot of money on that. So when you, in radio, how much of every dollar goes towards the content? Does anybody know? Is it 10 cents, 20 cents, 30 cents? I don't know. It can't be more than 50, is it? I don't know. But you guys can debate that later. But I know that in podcasting, it's a dollar, maybe it's 80 cents of every dollar goes into the actual program and 20 cents goes to the sales group. Maybe for me it's 90-10 or something. We're always talking about, can we upgrade the microphone? What can we do in terms of a segment? What's a better guest to get? Just real investment in content and really trying new formats that don't seem like they'll be mass. That's the other thing. TED was this like quirky, crazy conference that nobody thought would ever work. And it worked for like rich people to go and assuage their guilt about being rich and talk about malaria and shit. But then people were like, well, these talks about malaria and whatever, science are kind of appealing to everybody. Who knew that the public would be so intellectual that they would want to sit there and geek out to Freakonomics or Nate Silver? You underestimate the audience or anybody in the world at your peril. Don't underestimate people. So there's a big trend in news circulation apps, Circa, which I'm an investor in, Breaking News, Yahoo News Digest, Inside, which is my company, doing really well 60 days in, and the New York Times Now, which created a photocopy of my company, which is awesome whenever like the New York Times copies what you're doing. Very good. And so what this basically means is curation. There's too much news out there, there's too much content, but the content is presented in a way that is to waste people's time. People don't want their time wasted anymore. They don't want link-baiting headlines. They don't like slideshows. They don't want the Upworthy nonsense. They don't want the Business Insider nonsense. So how do we unravel that? That's what I'm trying to do with my company. That's what I spend my time doing with Inside. You can all try it on iOS. It'll be on Android in a couple weeks. But the basic idea is we find the best coverage of each of these individual stories, and we present it to you, and we take out all the bad stuff that you don't like about what's going on in journalism. Hopefully it gets more efficient. Big trend, fake it till you make it. BuzzFeed, Mashable, and Bleacher Report were known for creating schlocky content. Then they started to get traffic and make money. Then they started hiring people because they won Pulitzer Prizes. India is the new mainstream. Digital is replacing physical. UX is the new BD. UX is our fancy term for user interface. Mobile is the only platform that matters. 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 Mobile, phones, smartphones, mobile, that's all that matters. And the design of what happens on this tiny screen is your future. If you don't get this right, it's over. If you get it right, your businesses will double in size. Okay? Get it right, your business doubles in size. Get it wrong, you go away. Because there are other people who are going to get it right. You have to get this right. This is the primary consumption device. Thanks for having me.
Questions from the room? Yes, right here.
Yeah, so I see that Zuckerberg, purchased this 3D thing.
Yep.
He's got for gaming, we know that, but in general, mobile device platforms, what do you see the future of 3D beyond gaming?
Yeah, so why did Facebook buy Oculus Rift is a question everybody's asking. One reason is Zuckerberg is incredibly paranoid and is a student of history, and he has seen other companies, and highly intelligently so, other companies be disintermediated. When he saw Instagram, he said, wow, that's $1 billion, we're worth $50 billion, that'd be 2% of the worth of our company, but if that takes out our company, oh boy, that would be bad. We lose the whole stack of chips, so he bought some insurance. It turned out it was a brilliant move. That's what he's doing with Oculus Rift. It's an insurance policy. If people start to go into virtual environments to interact with people instead of doing texting, and they put on headsets to go meet and talk and chat and share photos and experiences, he wants a piece of that. And in a worst case scenario, he could license out the technology and make his money back in all likelihood. So it's a very small bet, even though it seems very big. I don't see a future for the 3D virtual reality stuff because every time it comes around, it doesn't seem to take off. And I don't know that people want it that much. So gaming, look at the gaming space. We have these incredible machines over here, PlayStation 3s, and then people want to play Flappy Bird, right? Like, human behavior has to play a role in this. I don't think humans want to put on this big fucking dorky headset and be like, I'm talking to my girlfriend in 3D space. It's like, go visit your girlfriend and take her on a fucking date. Like, that's better. You don't need the goggles, right? And so, like, it's sort of like Google Glass, right? Like, Google Glass is absolutely, anybody own Google Glass? Have you used it in the last 30 days? No. Great, exactly. Like, nobody uses it. It's got no use case unless you're a paramedic or you're an engine repair person and you open up the hood of the car and you see, exactly how fast the fan belt is moving and how fast it should be. Like, there's going to be amazing, amazing vertical apps for that. But it's not something people want. Nobody wants to have this interface in between people. And it's the same. That's my personal feeling. And so it's technology for technology's sake, but there will be edge case apps.
Next question from the room. Anybody? Running back. Meet you halfway, James.
And by all means, if you think I got something wrong, because I kind of look at this like predicting the weather, like in some cases, like I'm looking back at data, which is like looking at the correct weather report and looking forward, trying to make some predictions. I don't think any of this is necessarily certain.
So, Jason, earlier on you said, I think it was something about Chromecast, and you said, wow, for a radio audience, you're pretty tech savvy.
Yeah.
What? Explain yourself.
Yeah. So the way we look at the radio business, in the technology business is like these channels that play the same music over and over again, and they, insert ads, and, it's not that they're technologically not that savvy, but it just feels like they're not that savvy, like not super savvy. And the Chromecast to me felt like, well, that's like a very you have to be super savvy to even know it exists. Like, it's not like it's on NBC News or something, or 60 Minutes, like the Chromecast. Here it is. So, and maybe people underestimate the radio business, I think. One of the things I love about the radio business is its staying power. And I can tell when a technology company is doing really good because they buy radio ads. So, I'm in love with this company, Dropbox. I really wish I had invested in it. Not Dropbox, Dropcam. And I was like, I gotta make sure I reach out to the founder next time I'm in San Francisco and talk to them, because I think I should invest in that. And then, just this weekend, I was driving, and there was a Dropcam commercial. I was like, fuck, that investment opportunity is over, because if they're piling a bunch of money into radio, they figured out their model, and now they are using one of the most effective ad platforms to get stuff done. So, the radio feels like there's a lot of good stuff going on, but not a lot of risk-taking in the space, and not a lot of high-quality programming. It feels like a lot of the programming is all designed around listening time and trying to keep you for the commercial break. And it feels like you could get a better deal for content in podcasts. You could get better content and a better experience than turning on your radio. So I know that seems incredibly, simplistic, but there was a time when I felt like turning on terrestrial radio was going to be not as much serendipity and fun as turning on Sirius, because when I would flip through Sirius, sometimes I'd hear something interesting. Then at some point, Sirius started hiring Oprah Winfrey or Martha Stewart's kids to do stuff, and Oprah's friends, and it was terrible. And I was like, what are you doing? I don't want to care what Martha Stewart's daughter or Oprah's friends think. I want Martha Stewart or Oprah. Anyway, now I feel like that's radio, podcasting and Swell and Stitcher, or any of the online radio stuff. It's so much more compelling, the content there. Once you listen to that, it's very hard to go backwards to Sirius, which was supposed to have all this original content, and it's impossible to go back to terrestrial radio, because you turn on terrestrial radio and it's just the Z Morning Zoo kind of stuff. It's programmed too broad, and I understand you have to go big and broad and all those things, but if every station goes big and broad, doesn't it just water it out and make it all mashed potatoes? I don't know. I think that's how the public views it. I think that's how I view it. I think that's how a lot of technology people view it. Yes. I can't quote it. Right. So that was the deregulation that, in my opinion, cruelly punished radio listeners.
What do you
How
think?
How so?
Because then you had companies like Clear Channel and companies like CBS homogenizing radio so that they could.
Oh, okay, because of the consolidation.
Right.
Okay.
So,
I agree.
Right. So have you ever ventured outside of the U.S. and listened to radio stations in other countries?
I listen to BBC radio quite frequently, and I found a tech show through Swell about this BBC tech show, and then there's a great DJ show on BBC on Channel 4. Is that Channel 3 or Channel 4? Anyway, I find these things not through BBC. I find them through the internet. But yeah, I think international, there's some interesting stuff going on. I think that's what has to get recaptured here, is a little more. When I was a kid, we would stay up and we would listen to Idiot's Delight in New York on Sunday nights. What was that guy's name? Vince Scelsa? Scelsa? And we just thought that was the nuts. Wow, this guy's playing all kinds of crazy stuff. And we'd sit there with pens and paper and write shit down. What was that song? That was a Dylan track, but it was off of what? And how did he get that track? And we just loved it. And then he'd listen to a poem or something like that. And I understand that stuff is, at the time, it made sense, I think, to go big, right? In the age of conglomerates, and to go big and to study the audience and give them what they wanted. Now what's happened is people's tastes have changed. The finite commodity in the world is attention. And people have so many choices for attention that when they find something they like, they tend to go really deep on it, like Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones or a specific podcast. So you have to cater to maybe not the long tail, but a little bit more of this mid tail. And the mid-tail is what's going to kick terrestrial radio's ass, or maybe is, in terms of listening minutes, because all those podcasts are like mid-tail podcasts. They probably appeal to 1 million people, or 2 million people, or 5 million people. I don't know what the exact stats are on them, but hundreds of thousands to low millions of people. It's harder to make a business out of 10 things that get 1 million people than one thing that gets 10. I appreciate that. But I think if everybody goes with that same strategy of like, we're all going to make something that's for everybody, you're all going to make something that nobody cares about in a world of infinite choices. Infinite choices. There's too much. Attention is a scarce resource, and if you want to get attention, you have to make something that's better crafted. You're up against Ted, you know, like you're up against Mark, you know, Marin, yeah, Mark Marin. His podcast is brilliant. You know, you're up against like all this great stuff. You got to co-opt it and get those people back onto the network. Like, why is Leo Laporte have his own network? Why is it like some radio station just being like, my God, you're brilliant. Here, take these 5 channels. You figured it out. Everybody loves tech. Here, we'll syndicate you to the 5 major markets. Why would somebody not do that? I don't get it. He has like one show that he does that with, but like, that's what I'm saying is like, don't underestimate the audience. Take more chances, put more voices on, take more risk. I actually went to a couple of people and said, how much would it cost to buy a radio station? Because I was like, it can't be that expensive, right? Like, what does it cost to buy a radio station? Like, maybe we can buy a dying radio station and do this, you know? Like, because I would chip in, like, as a podcaster, if we could buy a station in San Francisco, and maybe we could, you know, put a billboard up and show all these different shows going on. And if there's 24 of us and we're on 24 hours a day, we could each pay for 4% of what it costs to buy the radio station. I don't know, if it cost $1 million or $5 million to buy a radio station, that might actually make sense. I don't know. Aren't there like little stations that, I don't know. Not San Francisco, obviously. Anyway.
Please join me in thanking Jason Calacanis.